you don't even want to see the truth.
We hope you'll find it interesting. Since 1989, the world has been told that the Soviet Union collapsed and that, except for several countries, communism is dead and the U.S. won the Cold War. The truth, the reality, is quite the reverse. Everything we have witnessed since 1989 has been a massive and successful, multi-decade-long deception strategy on the part of the KGB, the Soviet secret police. The goal? To deceive the West and achieve the goal of Leninist strategy, a totalitarian world government or international police state. We know this from the evidence provided by Anatoly Golitsyn, the most important defector from the KGB who came to America in 1961.
We have ways of helping truth catch up with lies, but that's not enough for all kinds of reasons. If you want to ask about that later, glad to do it. It's not just people with Photoshop in their classroom or basement or somewhere else. It's people at our best organizations who profoundly screw up and in some cases help get wars going. So we have a lot of work to do in traditional media. We need to improve the supply in every way, but I still trust more than not. I've been thinking about what to call some of this, and that title there, I've given it as the Disinformation Political Technical Industrial Complex, and it's a little bit too long for a tweet, but it feels like this is something we're having to deal with now.
Well, one of the features of the plan, obviously, was to give the impression that the international communist movement was breaking up, that there were splits, divisions, dissent, that there was a rift between Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union, there was a rift between Red China and the Soviet Union. All of these things were examples of this disinformation strategy. And one of the principal goals of it would be that the West would feel more secure and put down its guard.
Yes. Lenin's methodology involves the use of the dialectic. Now, the Western mind, which is a civilized, developed mind, does not understand dialectical deception, which is basically a Mongol concept. And the fake Russia-China split is a good example. By creating the false impression that there was a split, which incidentally they've continued ever since, because now we have communist China and supposedly non-communist Russia, so the illusion of the split continues.
That's right.
The West was lulled into believing that if it supported China, it would be taking precautionary action against Russia.
Yes.
In fact, what's happening, and is continuing, they are both working together, and their intentions ultimately are hostile. They are aggressively oriented towards the West.
In other news, tensions are soaring between Washington and Beijing, and in the middle of the brewing storm is the island nation of Taiwan.
Also at this hour, Canada has accused China of concerning and unprofessional behavior after China intercepted one of its patrol aircraft near North Korea, which forced planes to divert from their flight path.
All that saber rattling has also spooked the world economy. Every day it's the same headline. Your fuel is more expensive, your favorite food has gone missing from the shelves, your domestic currency is losing value. Let me show you some numbers. On the day of the invasion, $1 equaled 85 rubles. Then came the sanctions, the trade embargoes, the boycotts. All of it was supposed to break the Russian economy. Do you remember what Joe Biden said back in the month of March? He said the ruble is now rubble. Well, that ruble is now the best performing currency in the world. It is up 35% this year. $1 now equals 53 rubles.
Yes, and another consequence of staging, deliberately staging phony encouragement of, or setting up, let's say, setting up phony, the KGB setting up phony dissident movements within communist countries, and supposedly, or in a theatrical way, presenting what appears to be liberalization or some lessening of tight control. That also has the effect of lulling the underground, the genuine underground opposition to communism in these countries out in the open, giving them the false hope that they can speak out, and then further identifying them and destroying them.
Well, this goes back actually to Tsarist days. In fact, the Tsarist secret police were adept at this. But Stalin's henchman, the founder of the Cheka, Dzerzhinsky, was particularly skilled at using what we call false opposition. And in fact, this was the main thrust of Lenin's strategy in the 1920s. When Lenin launched into the West what is known as the Trust, he allowed the emigration of a large number of emigres, and in their number were many controlled communist members of the Cheka. And he introduced this false controlled opposition to Western intelligence. And as a result, the perception of by Western intelligence of what was really happening was distorted. Now, this principle has been applied since 1961, and it came to its fruition under Gorbachev.
Я думаю, скорее всего, ненависть к чернокожим, потому что был бы тот же самый белый парень, расплатился там $100, отношение было бы совсем другое.
Yes, and this is because everything that we've witnessed since 1989 has been part of this grand disinformation strategy, which Golitsyn revealed in his 1984 book, New Lies for Old, had been prepared by 1959.
Слышали ли вы о смерти Джорджа Флойда? Ну, об убийстве, я имею в виду.
Кого еще раз?
Да. Джордж Флойд, вот слышали, да?
Да.
Как вы к этому относитесь?
Негативно.
Почему негативно?
Не думаю, что у кого-то есть право отбирать жизнь любого человека.
А у полицейских она есть, по-моему?
Не важно. Суть в том, что не они дают жизнь, не они вправе распоряжаться. Могут они ее забрать или не могут.
An independent analysis of these predictions years later showed that over 94% of them came true by 1991 and since then. That's how we know Golitsyn was telling the truth, and quite correct.
Как вы относитесь к этому?
Отношусь сугубо отрицательно. Недопустимо так с людьми обращаться, тем более с людьми черного цвета. Это проявление расизма.
We need to emphasize that the understanding he provided about the strategy of which he was a part in the early 1959 to 61 period, informing this strategy in the KGB hierarchy. This multi-decade strategy means that nothing really has changed in the Soviet Union and the other satellite East Bloc communist states that call themselves democratic republics today. Nothing has changed except deception, appearance, and propaganda. And let's go over some examples of that. Don't we have the same KGB-leaden bureaucracy with different names on the doors?
London, which had been a major player with regard to slavery, by the way, after the loss of their largest market, speaking of North America, London evacuates from the African slave trade by 1807, nudged in that direction by revolutionary Haiti, which had begun to stir up trouble for London in neighboring Jamaica. There was in London that the better part of wisdom would be to move away from both the slave trade and slavery. Otherwise, fortunes would be lost, as was lost by the French slave owners in Haiti in 1804. And what happens is that London moves away from the slave trade in 1807, moves away from slavery itself in 1833. And then there's a diplomatic alliance, which I stress in my book. I also stress in my book, Negro Comrades of the Crown, between revolutionary Haiti and London. In fact, if you look at the history of Texas, from where I'm now speaking to you, in the wake of the Texas secession from Mexico in 1836, where Texas was a weakened independent republic, there was a fear amongst the settlers in Texas that Haiti and Britain would combine to overthrow settler rule in Texas and set up an independent Black republic in Texas as well. And so this was part of the pressure on the settlers in North America, and that pressure leads to a crisis that culminates in the U.S. Civil War in 1861.
And then it became a thing of like, oh, it's not necessarily that you don't believe that this is the truth. You don't even want to see the truth.
Then don't go passing statements of morality saying.
Do remember, check out the merch shop, check out the Patreon, hit the Cash App, hit the PayPal.